Welcome to Sneakers and Strategies, the podcast where high-level marketing throws on a fresh pair of kicks and hits the streets. Host Nick Kastner will help you find practical, actionable marketing insights that move with you. In Season 3, Nick's switching gears and going all in on Agile marketing. If you're still clinging to rigid plans and red tape, this season's your wake-up call. It's time to move fast, break patterns, and actually get done.
This is Sneakers and Strategies. I'm Nick, and today's principle, it's the one that makes project managers sweat and marketers breathe easier. And that is plan only to a level sufficient to ensure effective prioritization and execution. So let's translate that. That means we don't overplan, we don't underplan, we just plan just enough to move in the right direction. And so this is where Agile marketing really proves it's not chaos, it's really clarity. Because over-planning can create chaos and force you to lose momentum. So let me ask you this. How many times have you seen a marketing plan so detailed and so polished, so perfectly color-coded that nobody actually executed it? It sat in a shared drive, maybe someone looked at it one time, updated it, nothing ever happened with it. Then the real work got done off to the side in other documents, or your marketing team was just moving and ignored the actual plan. I've seen that happen before. I remember in college, I had the very first marketing plan I wrote was 65 pages long. So I've even created them. But that's what happens when we confuse planning with progress. Because Agile marketing says the goal of the plan is actually to help you prioritize and do something, not predict the future. And why is that? Because you can't predict the future. If you've seen Back to the Future 2, sure, if you could predict the outcome of every sporting event in the future, you'd be rich. But you can't. And the same is true for marketing. If the plan takes longer than the campaign, you're doing it wrong. And if we're being honest, plans are really best guesses anyway. And it's because most marketing plans are built around certainty. But marketing actually lives and breathes in uncertainty and in change, which we talked about last week, or in the last episode. You don't know how a campaign will perform. You don't know what Google's algorithm will do next week. You don't know what's going to happen on Instagram. You don't know if terms of service of a platform that you use now will change midstream. You don't know what will be popular. You don't know if that customer segment is even paying attention. So Agile really says, instead of trying to map out every single detail, why don't you just ask, what do we need to do right now to make the next best move? That's it. That's all you need to do. Plan enough to prioritize the right work, enough to align the team, and enough to move forward. Everything else is a nice to have, or worse, it can be a distraction. So when you hear all of this and hear this discussion about planning, that does not mean that you build your brand in a vacuum. It does not mean that you don't plan. It just means that you have to be wise about it. So planning's not a once and done. We're not building a permanent structure here. You have to think about marketing more like jazz. And not brand. Once you develop a brand voice, like, you need to know who you are. That's different. That's strategic. That's a strategic function. I believe in brand. And I think that's not something you build in flex, right? But marketing in and of itself, once you know who you are and know what you're trying to accomplish, it is like jazz. Sure, yes, you have to have structure, but it's also about rhythm and the ability to improvise. Few great jazz musicians know all the details going into a song. But they know the beat, they know the chords, they know the lyrical line in the song, and they're going to follow what happens along the way. And in a similar way, you don't build a 12-week, 24-week annual marketing campaign plan and then disappear. You have to plan fast, plan small, review often, and adjust ruthlessly. You have to constantly change your plan. So planning, at least the way that I see it, it's like a family road trip. So we're going to go on a family road trip, and let's say that we're going to go on a 3 or 6 or 12 month trip. We don't know what traffic's going to be like. We don't know how many accidents are going to be there along the way. We don't know how fast we can really go. We don't know the speed limit in every single space we're going to be in. But we know the direction. And really, agile planning, the agile planning piece of it becomes a series of these lightweight, simple checkpoints instead of a giant document that gets stale the second the market shifts. This is what allows agile teams to stay aligned without getting locked in. You know the direction, but how you get there needs to be adjustable based on the market. So now, again, we have to know who we are. So that is not part of planning. When I think about marketing planning, I'm thinking about the things that we actually do. So when we talk about agile marketing, I don't think you're agile in brand development. You're not agile in brand voice. You need to know who you are. But you are agile in how it gets executed. And you are agile in the way that you go to market and communicate to your constituents or your audiences. And what happens when you build big brands and you build these brand voice statements, which I love and do frequently, and I've talked about in this podcast before, but what we really want to do is we want to build a brand and then be functionally agile when we're actually executing. Now hear me. Once people build these brands, people love big plans. They love these big kind of blowout campaigns. And that forces them to overplan. And usually that comes from three places. And the reason we build these kind of massive plans, first is fear. People think that more planning equals less risk. But in marketing and in reality, more planning just delays getting useful feedback. Risk was there the entire time. Second is control. Some leaders, business owners, marketers, they all think planning everything means no surprises. But spoiler alert, there will always be surprises. It's better to be flexible than it is to be controlling. And the last is ego. Yeah. Some people just love showing off a perfect presentation. And they want applause before anything launches, and they want the pat on the back. That's not how it works. Because here's the deal. Your customer doesn't care about your plan. They care about the experience. They care about the message. They care about whether your offer wins. Planning should support that, not get in the way. Okay, so what does that actually look like in real life? When I say just enough, what is just enough planning? Well, here's what just enough planning might include. A clear goal or objective. What are we actually trying to do? Like, what are we trying to achieve and how do we measure that? Second, a prioritized backlog or task list. What's the most important work to do first? Then, once we have that, who's going to do it? Who owns what? Who's reviewing what? Who's doing the work? Next, what's the time window? Like, what's the timeline? And when we talk about Agile, many times you'll hear the word sprint. That is just a time window or time box, right? 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 6 weeks. What are the key milestones in that timeline? And that's it. There's no 10-tab spreadsheet. There's no 37-slide presentation. It's just a living, breathing roadmap that gets better as you go. And the key is how it's executed. So this principle is really powerful because it actually frees your team to actually get creative. Because when the plan's flexible, you can give people an opportunity to experiment. They can respond to what's working. They can push back on assumptions. They can shift faster. They can move the needle. And when the plan is just structured enough, everyone knows what matters. They know what not to waste time on because it doesn't move us forward. And then how to make smart decisions without waiting for approval. That's empowering your team. It's how they stay sharp and how they stay together. So if you want to live this principle, your tools need to match that mindset. Now, here's what works. Many organizations that move into agile marketing planning, use what they call a Kanban board or backlog. It's something visible that literally it can be a whiteboard, it could be software driven, but it just shows what's being worked on, what's blocked that you can't work on because something else isn't complete or someone else is holding up the project, and what's done. Many teams build out this in, like I said, a whiteboard or a board in Asana or Trello and make it as visible as possible so everyone knows what's happening and who's doing what. I've seen companies that will take their Trello board or Asana board and just put it on a giant 100-inch monitor in the office so everyone can see it all day long. I've seen companies that have a sticky wall, like they'll have sticky notes for everything, physical sticky notes. Sometimes that's easier. It just depends on your team if they're in office or not. Next, a weekly sync. So this meeting is to check progress, not to build more process. It's really simple. The questions that are asked in that weekly meeting are, what did you do last week? What are you doing this week? And what's in your way? And that's really how you manage that Kanban board or the backlog board, because then you can move things along the way. Next is what they call a retro meeting, and that is to reflect on what's working either during the sprint, typically after the sprint, time window, the time box, and then make adjustments or micro adjustments along the way. Again, speeding up the ability to change, because if you do run the marketing plan for a year and then you go back and say, oh, okay, now we have to change some things. It's been a year. You could have entirely screwed up the business by then. So what you're trying to do is make sure that you're moving things at the speed of industry. And you don't need a perfect project management tool to do this. You don't need some, expensive software. There are tools out there like Trello, Asana, ClickUp. All of those do it. You could literally have a whiteboard. You could just put it on a wall, giant piece of paper, or whatever. It's not a massive spreadsheet or document no one opens. Don't do that. But and here's the thing, if your planning tool requires its own training session, it's too much. You don't need that. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you do need to pause and replan, right? You may be in the middle of a sprint and it's just not going well. And here's when that's legitimate. Major variable changes. So platform changes, product changes, your audience behavior changes, you're losing sight of the goal. Your sprint output isn't delivering the outcomes you expected. The team's confused or overwhelmed. That's not failure. That's just Agile in action. The plan is a starting point, not a scoreboard, right? So again, Agile is about being agile. And make sure you understand what progress is. Increases in sales is progress, right? So if your goal is to reach a certain sales goal and you're seeing every month you're moving closer and closer to the goal, then you're moving in the right direction. Now, sometimes sales can be limited by algorithms. Sometimes sales can be limited by marketing spend, right? You may not have the budget to move faster. That is referred to as sustainable growth rate, right? And actual growth rate. How fast can you actually grow? Increases in brand impressions may be progress, right? So that may be how we measure progress. But you have to make sure your goal is outlined so you have a target. And that's one thing that happens frequently in Agile is when you have goalposts that move in an organization, it becomes really hard to run Agile. Because if one week the goal is this and the next week the goal is that, the next week the goal is this, sure, you can run sprints weekly that adjust with the goalposts, but you also have to be careful to make sure that you're aiming at something that matters. So with that, this week's challenge is plan audit. Pick one current marketing initiative you're working on, big or small, and ask just again 3 questions. If this plan is helping you prioritize and execute better, or is it slowing you down? And what part of this plan could you get rid of without losing any value? And then what's the next right thing you need to align on? And what don't you need yet? Then cut out something or all the things that are moving you in the wrong direction. You don't need to perfect the map. You just need to take the next step together. Because honestly, the longer you plan, the less you produce. And the tighter your priorities, the sharper your execution. And honestly, again, the more space you give your team, the more they'll deliver. Give them freedom and the opportunity to be creative. One thing that you have to be really careful with is not trying to dictate every answer, because they need the freedom to find the answers. So next week, we're unpacking another Agile truth. Take chances and learn from failures, because that's part of what we do in marketing, and that's how we get better. So until then, I'm Nick. This is Sneakers and Strategies. Make sure to visit forumspeaks.com, FORUMSPEAKS.com, or contact me at nick@forumspeaks.com. If our team at Forum can help your organization win or become part of your efforts to win for your business, nonprofit, or organization. All right. Thanks for listening.